What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NBA Pick and Pod. My name's Dawson Chen, and I'm your host. We're going to be starting off today with the third part in my series about the draft analysis and upcoming offseason for each NBA team. Today, we're going to be doing the next 5 Eastern Conference teams, starting off with the Cleveland Cavaliers, then discussing the Detroit Pistons, Indiana Pacers, Miami Heat, and Milwaukee Bucks, who I'm really looking forward to talking about. So, kicking it off with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are the NBA champions, so of course, you're already going to give them a great grade because their roster won an NBA championship. They don't need to do too much to improve on it. They really need to just keep their core together and maybe add a couple of better bench players, and they'll be all set to try and go at it again next year in a weak Eastern Conference. But they did have one pick in the NBA draft. They got Kay Felder in the second round. He's a point guard from Oakland. He goes to the 54th overall pick, which they got via Atlanta. And it could be a nice replacement in the Cavs rotation in case Dellavedova does leave or is forced out due to some very high contract offers from rival teams such as Detroit Pistons, who actually offered a $10 million a year, or is rumored to be offering a $10 million a year contract to Dellavedova. And to be honest, for a backup point guard that really didn't do too much in the playoffs besides his defensive efforts, that's probably not worth it for the Cavs, considering how far over the cap they are already. But it doesn't really matter because they picked up a point guard in the draft just in case, and he might develop into a Dellavedova replacement in case Dellavedova leaves. And also, they won a championship. Their roster's pretty much fine already. So there's not too much to worry about in this coming offseason. They're going to just re-sign LeBron. They're going to re-sign Kevin Love. They're going to keep their roster intact, hopefully. Moving on to the Detroit Pistons. We'll be talking about them. They had 2 picks in this draft. They had one first-round pick in the draft, which was 18th overall. They picked Henry Ellison, power forward out of Marquette. They didn't really have too many huge needs besides developing their young core, but they went out and they tried to get 2 players that were huge, that could be huge contributors on their roster later on. Ellison is a great, versatile big man who has a good offensive game, even stretching out to mid-range shooter, which is much better than Andre Drummond, who is not known as a shooter, but is very, very powerful down low, who could work well in tandem with him, hopefully, or help relieve him off the bench. And he was going to be a late lottery pick, but fell all the way down to the 18th, which is a huge steal for the Pistons. They also got Michael, and I'm going to butcher this last name, Gbinije, small forward out of Syracuse. He was the 49th overall pick, and I think he was a good pickup for them at small forward, who could turn into a good defensive player and well-rounded offensive passer, but not too much of a scorer in the NBA game. I don't think he has what it takes to really get going outside from three-point line like most of the other NBA players today at his position. But he could be a good lockdown defender, especially with his athleticism. And for a rookie off the bench, all he needs to do is be able to contribute something positive, and it'll be a plus side for the Pistons, who just hope to develop their core, which will only take time. There's not too much you can do about developing a core with Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond especially. That duo is going to be huge, hopefully, in the coming years for the Pistons. But another team that definitely needs to work on building a roster, Indiana Pacers, who drafted one player, the second round, in 50th overall. Now they got Iowa State's Georges Niang, small forward, who is one of the best players in Iowa State history, if not the best, I'm pretty sure. And it's a good pickup for them because Niang can get buckets. Now, Uncle Drew saying this game has always been and will always be about getting buckets. Well, Georges can get them. He can score in a variety of ways, and under the new coach, Nate McMillan, the Pacers want to play faster and score more, so it's a good pickup for them to get. But he's an absolutely shit defender. You could put a cone in front of him, and the cone would blow by him. He's just awful. So he's really going to be there for scoring, and maybe they can develop his defense, but I doubt it. The real big moves of the Pacers, however, came before the draft, when they got Jeff Teague for George Hill, and they got Thaddeus Young for the pick. That was pretty huge for them because they got some good, proven talent, and they traded away some picks that could have been worth nothing or just been decent, contributors. Instead, they got Jeff Teague, who's a good starter, and Thaddeus Young, who could be a great power forward for them, to help build around Paul George so they can try and compete right now. And despite the questionable firing of head coach Frank Vogel, who I think is an incredible head coach and should never have been fired, and Larry Bird made a massive mistake. But despite that firing and hiring of Nate McMillan, I think this next season is going to be a good season for them to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals if their roster can come together the way it looks like it does on paper, especially with Paul George playing at MVP caliber levels. Fourth team for today we're going to be talking about is the Miami Heat, who had an absolutely mind-blowingly non-existent draft. Just, they didn't have a pick. Not one. Not in the first round, not in the second round, nowhere. I don't even know how to rate this because they don't have picks. So I'm not going to rate it. Obviously, the Miami Heat organization doesn't really value picks too much. They do a lot of veteran signings that they got, like LeBron. When he was around, they would sign veterans such as Shane Battier, Mike Miller, players like that who aren't rookies on a draft. They don't have a great history of drafting rookies recently, so they don't bother. They trade their picks away for good players like Goran Dragic. But despite not having a draft, they do have some things to look forward to in this offseason. And by look forward to, I mean bite their fingernails and worry like all hell. Mainly, Hassan Whiteside. Now, that boy's about to get paid max deals. And so Miami Heat better hope he does not leave them. He is a huge defensive presence, and he's turning into an offensive presence that they're going to want to build with. Now, he's even stated that this offseason is not about showing loyalty to the team that found him per se, or developed him into an actual NBA player, which may frighten some Miami Heat fans because that might mean he's leaving if he finds a better suitor and a better team structure. I would be worried if I was the Miami Heat, and I would throw the house at him. All the money, all the cocaine, all the girls, whatever Miami's got, you throw it at him and hope he stays, because you're going to want him to have for the next couple of years. But we'll see how that develops, and I'll keep you guys posted on whether or not he stays with Miami Heat. That's really their only major off-season story, though. And the last team I'm going to talk about today, in this pretty short video because these teams don't have too big of drafts, is the Milwaukee Bucks, who had a hysterical draft. I mean, wow. Their draft is just ridiculous. The whole team is crazy to me. Honestly, we're just going to break this down. I'm not even going to bother complaining yet. So, they had one first-round pick, 10th overall, and they picked THON Maker, power forward from Australia, who was supposedly a 19-year-old repeat senior year high school player. Now, that was very, very confusing. That means that he's had high school for 5 years, supposedly, and was 19 coming out of it. Now, as you may have seen in the comment section of the last video, it turns out THON Maker is actually 23, maybe even a little older. Supposedly, he graduated in 2010 in an Australian high school, but that his agent resurfaced him as a supposedly phenom 8th grader back in 2011 and started shopping him around in 3 or 4 different US and Canadian middle schools and then high schools, and finally into his final high school, where at that point everyone believed that he was much younger than he actually was. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, why does that matter if his basketball talent's good? Well, the problem with THON Maker is that his basketball talent's pretty piss poor. The real key to him is his potential, his size, and his wingspan and length. That can be huge on a team like the Bucks because their entire team is just lanky as all hell. They're just so lanky. Everyone's got like 7-foot wingspan. That's ridiculous. Jabari Parker's got one of the smallest wingspans of the team, and he has a 6'11" wingspan. So, THON Maker himself has a 7'3" wingspan. He's very, very tall. He can be a good defender, but he has no offensive touch, and he could barely dominate as a 23-year-old in high school. That's not a good sign. And with the lack of polish and the older age, it might indicate the fact that he can't really develop any more than he already has. Now, if he was 19 and this unpolished, you might say, well, he's very young. He can continue to grow and continue to develop. But at this point, one might start to worry about why the Bucks would pick someone who they should know is much older than he is, because there was smoke for the past couple of months about his age, and then there was a fire last night when it all came out that he was 23. And if he can't develop properly, they're going to get rammed for this pick. And in my opinion, they rightfully should get rammed about this because it was an awful pick. I can't see this panning out very well unless he just becomes a phenomenal basketball player overnight. I just don't get it. But they had a pretty good second round pick. 36th overall, they got Malcolm Brogdon, who is a shooting guard out of Virginia, who's a very good addition in the second round. But the hard part about it is that they got Thon Maker at 10th, the 10th pick of the draft. When Maker was supposed to drop all the way to the second round. It's just, I can't even wrap my head around this organization. I don't know what they're going to do because Malcolm Brogdon is a pretty good shooting guard who can be a good addition to the team and a contributor, especially off the bench defensively and offensively, spacing the floor. But what is Thon Maker going to do on this team? This is the question I'm really wondering. If any of you guys have any opinions about Thon Maker, leave it in the comments, or what the hell the Bucks are doing as an organization, because I'd love to read it. But that's all for today for breaking down. These are the second 5 teams in the Eastern Conference, and tomorrow we're coming back at you with the second part of the Western Conference series. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. Leave a comment about Thon Maker or anything else you'd like to talk about. I'll be happy to read it and reply. Have a great day, everyone.